The cruelest regrets are never born from the words we said. They are born from the moments we chose to remain silent. The last dinner began like every elegant evening Ethan Whitmore had carefully engineered. Perfect on the surface, hollow underneath. Beyond the towering glass walls of their Manhattan penthouse, the city shimmered beneath a blanket of golden lights. Luxury yachts drifted along the Hudson like scattered stars, while helicopters carved quiet paths across the twilight sky. Inside, crystal chandeliers bathed the dining room in a warm glow that softened the sharp edges of marble, polished walnut, and decades-old artwork collected from around the world. Naomi Carter placed the final candle at the center of the table before stepping back to admire the room. She wore a midnight blue silk dress that caught the light every time she moved. It wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. Her quiet confidence gave every thread its elegance, and the silver bracelet resting against her dark skin reflected tiny flashes of candlelight that looked almost like falling stars. Ethan barely looked up from the financial reports glowing across his tablet. "The board moved tomorrow's meeting to 8, he said, absent-mindedly reaching for his wine. Naomi smiled gently. "I thought tonight belonged to us." "It does." His answer came automatically. Professional. Efficient. Almost rehearsed. He took another sip without noticing she had prepared his favorite Bordeaux, the same vintage they had shared on the night they signed their marriage contract 3 years earlier. She remembered every detail. He remembered none. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers as silence settled comfortably around them. Naomi had long ago stopped fearing silence. It had become another language in their marriage, one where she listened while Ethan remained endlessly occupied with building an empire that seemed to grow larger each day. "You've been sleeping less," she observed quietly. "I'll sleep after the acquisition closes. There will always be another acquisition. There will." For a brief moment, Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Naomi watched him carefully, memorizing the familiar crease between his brows, the way exhaustion lingered behind his pale blue eyes, and the tiny scar near his jaw he had gotten years before they met. She looked at him as though she already knew this would be the last time. Outside, rain began tapping gently against the windows. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan glanced toward the skyline. "The weather?" "No." She smiled without explaining. "This moment." He nodded politely before another message illuminated his phone. Board members. Investors. Markets in Europe. Everything demanded his attention. Everything except the woman sitting across from him. Naomi folded her hands beneath the table. She didn't interrupt him again. Instead, she allowed herself to simply watch. She noticed the untouched dessert she had baked from scratch after leaving work early. She noticed the anniversary candle still hidden inside the cabinet because she had decided not to light it. She noticed the wedding ring resting comfortably on Ethan's finger, a symbol he wore every day without remembering when it had stopped meaning anything. Some absences begin long before anyone walks away. When dinner ended, Ethan stood first. "I have 2 conference calls before midnight." "I know." He leaned forward almost out of habit, brushing a brief kiss against her forehead. It was gentle, respectful, completely empty. "Good night, Naomi." "Good night, Ethan." She remained seated long after his footsteps disappeared upstairs. The candles slowly burned lower. Wax spilled onto white linen like tiny rivers of forgotten promises. Naomi reached into her purse and quietly removed a folded envelope addressed in elegant handwriting. She placed it beside his untouched wine glass. Then she slipped off her wedding ring. It rested beside the letter, catching one final reflection from the chandelier before the flame flickered. Upstairs, Ethan closed another multi-million-dollar deal. Downstairs, the woman who had quietly loved him through every victory stood, picked up a single overnight bag, and walked toward the front door without looking back. When Ethan woke the following morning, the penthouse remained exactly as he had left it. Everything was still there. Everything. Except Naomi. 3 years earlier, before the silence became their daily language, Ethan Whitmore believed marriage could be negotiated like any other corporate acquisition. Every risk could be measured. Every outcome could be controlled. Love, in his mind, was simply the one variable intelligent people learned to eliminate. The conference room overlooking Central Park was flooded with pale winter sunlight the morning they first met. Snow drifted beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, softening the city into something almost peaceful, though neither of them noticed. Naomi Carter arrived exactly on time. She wore a tailored charcoal coat over an ivory dress, her natural curls pinned neatly above thoughtful brown eyes that carried neither excitement nor fear. She walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned everything through discipline rather than privilege. Ethan looked up from the contract only briefly. "You read the agreement already?" "I have." "And?" She placed the leather folder onto the polished walnut table. "I'll sign under one condition." For the first time that morning, she had his full attention. "My work stays mine." Ethan frowned. "You mean your law practice?" "My nonprofit cases. They don't generate profit. They generate purpose." Silence lingered between them. Outside, snow continued falling over Manhattan. Ethan had spent weeks searching for the perfect candidate. The board demanded a wife with an impeccable reputation after rumors surrounding his father's declining health threatened investor confidence. A stable marriage would reassure shareholders, preserve voting control, and silence the financial press. Nothing more. Naomi needed something entirely different. Her adoptive father's community legal center in Harlem was weeks away from closing after losing a major federal grant. Hundreds of families depended on its services. The compensation offered in Ethan's proposal could keep the doors open for years. Both of them entered the room believing they were making a rational decision. Neither realized destiny rarely respected rationality. "There will be separate bedrooms," Ethan said calmly. "I expected that. Our personal lives remain private." "Agreed." "No children." Naomi hesitated for only a heartbeat. "If that's what you want." "No interviews. No public affection beyond appearances. No emotional expectations." She listened to every condition without interruption. When he finished, she folded her hands together. "My turn." He nodded. "You will never ask me to hide who I am." His expression remained unreadable. "I have no interest in changing you. You will treat every member of my family with respect." "Of course. And if either of us ever loses ourselves inside this arrangement." She paused, choosing each word carefully. "We leave with dignity." Something about that final sentence lingered longer than either expected. Ethan reached for his pen. "You negotiate well." A faint smile appeared. "I negotiate honestly." They signed beneath the quiet ticking of an antique clock that had witnessed billion-dollar mergers and hostile takeovers. Neither signature trembled. The marriage that followed appeared flawless to the outside world. Magazine covers called them Manhattan's most elegant power couple. Business journals praised Ethan's stability. Charity organizations admired Naomi's dedication. Photographers captured perfect smiles beneath crystal chandeliers. No camera ever photographed what happened after the flashes disappeared. At home, they occupied opposite sides of a magnificent penthouse that slowly became too large for two lonely people. Ethan disappeared into board meetings before sunrise. Naomi disappeared into courtrooms, shelters, and neighborhoods most of Manhattan's elite had never visited. She learned how he preferred his coffee without ever being asked. He never noticed who placed it beside his desk every morning. She remembered his mother's medical appointments. He assumed the nurses handled everything. She quietly replaced the lilies in the living room every Friday because they reminded him of the only vacation he ever took with his parents. He believed the flowers simply arrived. Day after day, Naomi built a home around a man who never realized someone was building one at all. Looking back years later, Ethan would remember the contract. He would remember every clause, every signature, every carefully negotiated condition. But the one promise that would haunt him forever was not written anywhere on those pages. It was hidden inside Naomi's gentle smile. The silent promise to love someone who had never asked to be loved. Some people save a life with one heroic act. Naomi Carter did it 1,000 times with kindness so quiet that no one ever applauded. Spring settled gently over Manhattan during their second year of marriage. Cherry blossoms softened the avenues outside Whitmore Global headquarters, while sunlight poured through the towering windows of Ethan's executive office. Investors celebrated another record-breaking quarter. Financial magazines praised Ethan as the youngest CEO to expand the company into 4 continents before turning 36. Everyone admired the empire. No one noticed the woman quietly protecting its foundation. Every morning, Naomi arrived at her own law office before sunrise. Her work focused on civil rights, housing discrimination, and legal aid for families who could never afford attorneys. By afternoon, she attended board meetings for Ethan's charitable foundation, reviewing contracts that most executives considered insignificant. She never mentioned that she corrected mistakes before they became lawsuits. She simply did it. One Tuesday afternoon, Ethan entered his office to find a revised acquisition agreement already waiting on his desk. "Who changed this?" he asked his legal director. "No idea, sir." He skimmed the pages. A hidden clause that would have cost the company nearly $80 million had disappeared, replaced with language protecting Whitmore Global from future liability. "Find whoever caught this." The director smiled. It was Mrs. Whitmore. Ethan paused for barely a second. "Tell her, thanks." He returned to answering emails before the words had even settled in the room. Across the city, Naomi never learned he had noticed. That evening, she prepared dinner herself because the chef had taken the week off to care for his newborn son. The aroma of rosemary and roasted garlic drifted through the penthouse, while soft piano music filled the quiet rooms. Ethan arrived nearly 2 hours late. "I'm sorry," she smiled. "You've said that every Tuesday this month." "I know. The food is still warm." She never asked why work always came first. She already knew. As they ate, Ethan's phone vibrated endlessly across the table. Tokyo, London, Zurich. Every city seemed to demand another piece of him. Naomi watched him answer 3 calls before finishing half his meal. "You should eat," she said softly. "I will." "You won't." He looked up briefly. "You worry too much." "I worry enough for both of us." The sentence almost made him laugh. Almost. After dinner, Ethan disappeared into his office again. Naomi quietly cleared the dishes before slipping downstairs to visit Eleanor Whitmore at the private guest suite. Ethan's mother had been battling the early stages of Parkinson's disease for over a year. Few people knew. Eleanor preferred privacy. Naomi preferred compassion. She brushed the older woman's silver hair, read aloud from her favorite novel, organized medication schedules, and stayed until Eleanor finally drifted into peaceful sleep. When she returned upstairs, the penthouse had fallen silent. Ethan was asleep over his laptop, still wearing his tie. She walked toward him carefully. The blue glow of financial charts reflected across his tired face, making him look far younger than the powerful executive the world admired. Gently, she removed his glasses, folded them neatly, placed a blanket over his shoulders. For a fleeting second, her fingertips hovered above his cheek. Not touching, simply remembering what closeness felt like. "I hope one day," she whispered into the quiet room, "you find something worth coming home to." She turned off the office lamp before leaving. The next morning, Ethan woke unusually rested. The blanket confused him. He assumed housekeeping had stopped by. The fresh coffee waiting beside his laptop must have been prepared automatically. His mother's improved mood? Probably the new medication. One by one, every act of Naomi's love disappeared behind ordinary explanations. That afternoon, as Ethan stepped into another board meeting filled with applause and billion-dollar ambitions, Naomi stood alone. Outside a neighborhood courthouse, after helping a young black family keep the home they had nearly lost because of illegal discrimination. No cameras waited for her. No headlines celebrated her victory. She simply smiled at the little girl who hugged her tightly before running into her mother's arms. For the first time in years, Naomi realized something painful. Strangers saw her heart more clearly than her own husband ever had. There are nights that destroy a marriage without a single door being slammed. All it takes is one moment when the person who should stand beside you decides not to. The annual Whitmore Foundation Gala was the social event of the season. Held inside the Grand Astoria Ballroom, it attracted senators, Fortune 500 executives, philanthropists, celebrities, and journalists from across the country. Crystal chandeliers cascaded from the vaulted ceiling like frozen waterfalls, reflecting thousands of tiny lights across polished marble floors. Everything sparkled. Everything looked perfect. Naomi stepped from the limousine wearing an elegant emerald gown that flowed effortlessly around her. A pair of pearl earrings, once belonging to her adoptive mother, rested against her neck. Ethan offered his arm as cameras erupted in flashes. They looked like the couple every magazine admired. Inside, smiles came easily. Compliments flowed as generously as champagne. Board members congratulated Ethan on another remarkable year, while donors praised Naomi's dedication to community outreach. For a while, she almost believed the evening would be different. Almost. Later, Ethan was called away by several investors discussing an international merger. "I'll only be a few minutes," he promised. Naomi nodded. "I'll be fine." She wandered toward an exhibit showcasing the foundation's scholarship recipients, studying photographs of young students whose futures had been transformed through education. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "I didn't realize the foundation had become so diverse." She turned. 3 elegantly dressed guests stood nearby, each holding a crystal champagne glass. One woman offered a smile that never reached her eyes. "I suppose diversity polls. Well, these days." Another chuckled softly, especially when it's standing next to a billionaire. Naomi remained calm. "I'm proud of the foundation's work." "Oh, I'm sure you are," the first woman replied. "People have become remarkably generous with opportunities lately." The words were polished, civilized, wrapped in expensive perfume and practiced smiles. Yet every sentence carried the same message. "You don't belong here." Naomi had heard versions of it throughout her life. In classrooms, courtrooms, boardrooms, luxury boutiques, country clubs, sometimes loudly, more often quietly. She drew a slow breath, refusing to surrender her dignity. "My qualifications speak for themselves." A man standing beside the women laughed under his breath. "Qualifications?" His gaze drifted deliberately across the ballroom. "Or excellent timing." The small circle around them grew noticeably quieter. Several guests heard. Some looked uncomfortable. None intervened. Across the room, Ethan looked up from his conversation. Their eyes met. For one brief heartbeat, Naomi believed he was coming. He saw the expressions surrounding her. He recognized the tension. He understood exactly what was happening. She waited. One step. That was all it would take. One sentence. One gesture. One acknowledgement that she wasn't standing alone. Instead, one of the investors touched Ethan's shoulder and continued discussing the merger. Ethan hesitated. Then he looked away. Just for a moment. Just long enough. The conversation around Naomi continued as though she had already become invisible. She felt something inside her grow perfectly still. Not anger. Not humiliation. Something quieter. Something final. She offered the group a composed smile. "I hope you all enjoy the evening." Without another word, she walked toward the ballroom terrace. Outside, the cool autumn air wrapped around her as Manhattan glittered beneath the night sky. Far below, traffic moved endlessly through the streets, unaware that an entire life had just changed above them. A few minutes later, Ethan found her standing alone. "There you are." She turned slowly. "How did the merger discussion go?" He blinked. "It was productive." "I'm glad. You seem quiet." "I've always been quiet." He studied her face. For the first time in 3 years, he couldn't read her expression. "I thought something happened." Naomi looked toward the city lights. "It did." "What?" She smiled gently, though her eyes carried a sadness deeper than tears. "Nothing you'll remember." She slipped her hand into his as photographers called them back inside. The cameras captured another flawless image of Manhattan's perfect couple. No photograph revealed the truth. Because at that exact moment, while Ethan believed he had saved a business deal, he had quietly lost the only person who had ever truly been on his side. The emptiest houses are never missing furniture. They are missing the person who quietly made them feel like home. Ethan woke just after 6, expecting another ordinary Thursday. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving Manhattan wrapped in pale morning light. He reached instinctively toward the empty side of the bed before sitting upright, assuming Naomi had already left for an early court appearance. It wouldn't have been unusual. She often started her mornings before sunrise. He dressed quickly, checking overnight market reports as he walked downstairs. "Naomi," he called casually. No answer. The dining room remained perfectly arranged. 2 wine glasses still rested on the table exactly where they had been left the night before. One had never been touched. Only then did he notice the envelope. His name was written across the front in Naomi's unmistakably elegant handwriting. Beside it lay her wedding ring. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared. His mind refused to connect the 2 objects. The ring, the letter, neither belonged there. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. No accusations. No dramatic farewell. Only one sentence. "Thank you for giving me the chance to learn that loving someone should never require disappearing inside their life." Nothing else. No forwarding address. No explanation. No request. Just her signature. Naomi. He checked every room of the penthouse. Her closet was nearly empty. The small overnight bag she used for business trips was gone. So were the framed photographs from her office, her favorite books, and the pearl earrings she treasured most. Everything she truly loved had quietly disappeared. Everything else remained, as though she had carefully erased herself without disturbing the life she was leaving behind. Evelyn, Ethan called the house manager. Did Mrs. Whitmore say where she was going? The older woman lowered her eyes. No, sir. When did she leave? A little after midnight. And no one stopped her? Evelyn hesitated. She didn't look like someone who wished to be stopped. The words unsettled him far more than they should have. Throughout the morning, Ethan buried himself in meetings. Revenue forecasts, international expansion, quarterly projections. He answered every question with his usual precision. Yet his concentration fractured repeatedly. Around noon, he reached for his coffee. There wasn't one. He frowned. Has the assistant been reassigned? His executive secretary looked confused. Sir, my coffee. We've never prepared it. He blinked. Then who had? Later that afternoon, he called his mother. To his surprise, Eleanor answered with unusual disappointment. I thought Naomi would come today. She isn't with you? No. Silence. I assumed she was traveling with you. Ethan felt an unfamiliar tightness settle in his chest. After work, he returned to the penthouse. The silence greeted him first. No music drifted from the kitchen. No fresh flowers brightened the entryway. The lilies had begun to wilt. He opened the refrigerator. Perfectly organized. Every container labeled in Naomi's handwriting. Meals prepared for the next several days. His favorite soup. Fresh fruit already washed. Even a handwritten reminder taped inside the door. Don't skip lunch during board week. He stood there far longer than necessary. That evening, he searched for a clean dress shirt before discovering every closet perfectly arranged by color, season, and occasion. He had never noticed. Not once. He walked through the apartment slowly, seeing it as though someone had quietly removed a veil from his eyes. The bookshelves she dusted every Sunday. The piano she tuned for his mother's visits. The reading lamp she always left on when he worked late. The blanket folded over his office chair. Nothing extraordinary. Everything essential. For years, he had mistaken consistency for inevitability. He believed these comforts simply existed. Like electricity. Like running water. Like air. Only after they vanished did he understand they had always been acts of love. As midnight approached, Ethan found himself standing before the dining table once again. The empty chair across from him remained exactly where Naomi had left it. For the first time since their marriage began, the penthouse felt enormous. Not because it had grown larger, but because the quiet woman who had filled every corner of it with invisible devotion was no longer there. And in the unbearable silence, Ethan experienced something entirely new. He missed someone he had never truly taken the time to know. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It comes in quiet pieces, each one making it impossible to remember the person you used to be. 3 days after Naomi disappeared, Ethan canceled his first board meeting in 12 years. No one at Whitmore Global could remember that ever happening. He offered no explanation. Instead, he drove to the Community Legal Center in Harlem, hoping someone there might know where Naomi had gone. The receptionist recognized him immediately. Mrs. Carter isn't here anymore. Carter, Ethan asked before realizing she had instinctively used Naomi's maiden name. She resigned 2 weeks ago. Did she leave an address? The woman shook her head gently. No. As Ethan turned to leave, an elderly janitor stopped him. You must be Mr. Whitmore. I am. The man smiled kindly. She talked about you every day. Something tightened inside Ethan's chest. What did she say? That you worked harder than anyone she'd ever met. Nothing else. No complaints. No bitterness. Only admiration. It felt undeserved. Back at the penthouse, Ethan wandered into Naomi's study for the first time since she had left. He had always respected it as her private space. Now it felt like the only place where she might still exist. The shelves were nearly empty. Most of her books had disappeared. Inside one cabinet, however, he found several neatly labeled folders. One caught his attention. Whitmore Global, Legal Review. Confused, he opened it. Page after page documented contracts Naomi had quietly corrected over the past 3 years. Potential lawsuits. Regulatory violations. Hidden financial risks. Each one marked with handwritten notes in her elegant script. Resolved without board notification. Vendor agreed to revised terms. Potential discrimination claim settled confidentially. There were dozens. No, hundreds. His phone rang. It was Daniel Foster, the company's chief legal officer. Ethan, I was reviewing archived files. So was I. There was a pause. I don't think you know how many times your wife saved this company. Ethan remained silent. Daniel continued. Some of these mistakes would have destroyed acquisitions. I never authorized outside reviews. You didn't. Then why was she doing it? Another pause. Because she cared. The call ended. Ethan lowered himself into Naomi's chair, unable to look away from the stacks of folders surrounding him. Hours passed unnoticed. Then another discovery. A smaller notebook rested beneath the bottom drawer. Inside were dates, doctor appointments, medication schedules, his mother's physical therapy sessions, nutritional plans. Every page carefully organized. On the final entry, Naomi had written, Eleanor smiled today after finishing the entire chapter by herself. Tell Ethan. He'll be proud of her. He never had been told, because he had never asked. That evening Ethan visited his mother. Eleanor looked toward the hallway before greeting him. I thought Naomi was with you. So did I. His mother's smile faded. She used to come every Tuesday and Thursday. Every week. For almost 3 years. Ethan stared. You never mentioned it. I assumed you knew. He hadn't. Not once had he wondered why his mother's condition had improved so steadily. He had thanked specialists, therapists, medication, everyone except the woman who had quietly given up hundreds of evenings simply to make sure his mother never felt alone. Driving home through the city, every traffic light became another memory. The coffee waiting. Every morning. The flowers that somehow always stayed fresh. The organized schedules. The handwritten reminders. The calm voice asking if he had eaten. The blanket placed over his shoulders. None of it had been coincidence. It had been Naomi. Always Naomi. For years she had stood just outside the spotlight, making everyone else's lives brighter while asking for nothing in return. Especially his. When Ethan returned to the penthouse, he walked into the dining room where her wedding ring still rested beside the folded letter. This time he picked it up. The gold felt unexpectedly warm in his hand. For the first time since she had vanished, he stopped asking himself where Naomi had gone. Instead, he confronted a far more painful question. How had he lived beside a woman this extraordinary and never truly seen her at all? Sometimes the longest journey is not measured in miles. It is measured in the distance between the man you were and the man you are trying to become. A week after Naomi disappeared, Ethan stopped asking private investigators to search luxury hotels and airports. They found nothing, because they had been looking for the woman they imagined Naomi to be, not the woman she truly was. One rainy Saturday morning, Ethan unfolded a road map across the hood of his car. Scattered beside it were addresses copied from Naomi's old notebooks, community centers in Chicago, legal clinics in Detroit, churches in Birmingham, youth programs in Atlanta. Places he had never heard her mention. Places she had quietly supported with her own time. He left Manhattan before sunrise. For the first time in years, there were no assistants, no security detail, no carefully planned itinerary. Only unanswered questions. His first stop was a neighborhood legal clinic in Philadelphia. A young attorney recognized Naomi's photograph immediately. She volunteered here last winter. Did she tell you where she was going? The woman smiled sadly. Naomi never talked much about herself. What did she talk about? Everyone else. As Ethan walked back to his car, he noticed a faded mural on the side of a nearby building. Children of every race stood together beneath a single sentence, painted in bold blue letters. Dignity belongs to everyone. He found himself staring at those words much longer than he intended. Over the following days, he drove farther south. In Baltimore, an elderly pastor remembered Naomi organizing free legal workshops. In Richmond, a school principal recalled her helping students apply for college scholarships. In Charlotte, a single mother showed Ethan a family photograph. Ms. Carter saved our home. She pointed toward her 2 children. They still pray for her every night. Everywhere he went, strangers welcomed Naomi's memory as though she were family. No one mentioned her wealth. No one cared that she had been married to one of America's most powerful CEOs. They remembered something else entirely. Her patience, her kindness, her willingness to stay long after everyone else had gone home. The farther Ethan traveled from Manhattan, the more clearly he began to see a country Naomi had always understood. He stopped at small diners where conversations suddenly fell quiet as black families entered. He watched an elderly security guard follow a teenage boy through a department store without ever speaking to him. At a gas station in rural Virginia, he witnessed a black veteran calmly endure suspicious questions from a cashier while the white customers behind him were greeted with effortless smiles. None of it exploded into confrontation. None of it made national headlines. It existed in ordinary moments. Small wounds repeated so often they became invisible to those who never experienced them. Ethan remembered the gala, the polished insults, the elegant smiles, his own silence. For years he had convinced himself that saying nothing meant causing no harm. Now he understood something Naomi had learned long before they met. Silence protects the person who stays comfortable, never the person standing alone. Late one evening, he parked beside a quiet lake outside Atlanta. The water reflected the last colors of sunset as he opened the glove compartment. Naomi's wedding ring still rested inside. He held it carefully between his fingers. "I thought providing everything was enough," he whispered into the empty air. The breeze carried his words across the still water. A retired teacher sitting nearby glanced toward him. "You lose someone?" Ethan nodded. "I don't know if I can ever get her back." The older man smiled with gentle understanding. "Sometimes people don't leave because they stop loving you." He paused before adding softly, "They leave because they finally start loving themselves." Those words followed Ethan long after darkness settled across the lake. For the first time since Naomi disappeared, he realized his search was no longer about bringing his wife home. It was about becoming the kind of man worthy of standing beside her, if life ever offered him that privilege again. The greatest transformation is not becoming successful. It is reaching the moment when success no longer needs to prove your worth. Nearly 4 months after Naomi left, Ethan received a phone call that stopped time. It came from Daniel Foster. "I think I found her." The address wasn't a home. It wasn't a hotel. It was the headquarters of the Carter Justice Initiative, a newly established national nonprofit in Washington, D.C., dedicated to fighting discrimination, expanding legal access, and mentoring young attorneys from underserved communities. Ethan drove through the night. As dawn broke over the Capitol, he stood across the street from a restored brick building where volunteers hurried through wide glass doors carrying boxes of books, laptops, and legal files. A bronze plaque near the entrance read, "Justice begins when dignity is no longer negotiable." He recognized the sentence immediately. Naomi had once written those exact words in the margin of one of her notebooks. Inside the lobby, photographs lined the walls. Families reunited after wrongful evictions. Students celebrating college scholarships. Veterans receiving legal assistance. Children laughing at community events. Naomi appeared in many of the photographs. Always smiling. Always standing slightly behind everyone else. Never seeking the center of attention. A receptionist welcomed Ethan politely. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. I'm here to see Naomi Carter." She smiled knowingly. "Executive Director Carter is speaking at today's Leadership Forum." Executive Director. The words echoed in his mind. A volunteer escorted him toward a large auditorium. The room was already filled with judges, educators, nonprofit leaders, journalists, and hundreds of young law students. On the stage stood Naomi. She wore a simple ivory suit with no expensive jewelry except the silver bracelet Ethan remembered so well. She looked exactly as she always had, yet somehow completely different. Not because success had changed her, because peace had. She stood taller, spoke with effortless confidence. Her voice filled the room without ever becoming loud. "Dignity isn't something another person gives you," she told the audience. "It begins the moment you decide your silence is no longer the price of someone else's comfort." The audience listened in absolute stillness. Ethan did too. As she spoke about justice, compassion, and courage, he realized she never mentioned her own sacrifices. She spoke only about the people whose lives could still be changed. When the speech ended, the auditorium erupted into a standing ovation. Students surrounded her. Reporters requested interviews. Volunteers asked questions. She greeted every person with the same warmth she had once reserved for a lonely man too distracted to notice. Ethan remained at the back of the room, watching, waiting. For the first time since meeting Naomi, he understood that she had never needed his wealth, never needed his name, never needed the glamorous life he believed he was offering. She had always possessed something infinitely rarer: purpose. Eventually, the crowd began to thin. Naomi turned toward the exit. Their eyes met across the quiet auditorium. Neither moved immediately. Neither looked away. Finally, Ethan walked forward. "You've built something extraordinary." Naomi smiled gently. "We built it." He frowned. "I wasn't here." "No." Her voice carried no bitterness. "But what I learned during our marriage helped me build all of this." He lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry." She studied him for a long moment. He looked different. The expensive confidence had disappeared. In its place stood a man carrying genuine humility for perhaps the first time in his life. "I know," she said softly. 3 simple words. No anger. No accusation. Only truth. For reasons Ethan couldn't explain, those words hurt far more than rejection ever could. Because forgiveness, offered with such quiet grace, forced him to confront the full weight of everything he had failed to become. As Naomi turned to greet another young attorney waiting nearby, Ethan noticed something remarkable. She was no longer the woman who had once waited for him to notice her. She had become the woman the world had already learned to see. And standing there among hundreds of people inspired by her courage, Ethan finally accepted the hardest truth of all. He had not lost Naomi because she disappeared. He lost her the day he failed to stand beside her, and she found the strength to stand fully on her own. The night that changes your life forever is rarely the one where everything falls apart. It is the one where you finally choose who you will become. Winter returned to Washington almost a year after Naomi had walked away from the penthouse. Snow drifted quietly outside the Carter Justice Initiative as volunteers decorated the lobby for another community fundraiser. Children laughed while hanging paper stars across the windows, each carrying the handwritten dream of someone determined to build a better future. Naomi watched them from her office. She smiled, not because life had become perfect, but because it had become honest. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Carter," her assistant said gently. "Mr. Whitmore is here." Naomi closed the file she had been reviewing. "Please send him in." Ethan entered carrying no flowers, no expensive gifts, no dramatic speeches prepared by public relations experts. Only a small wooden box worn smooth by time. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It simply acknowledged everything words could never fully explain. "I wasn't sure you'd agree to see me," Ethan admitted. "You asked respectfully." She invited him to sit beside the window, overlooking the snowy street below. Children chased one another across the sidewalk, their laughter drifting faintly through the glass. Ethan placed the wooden box on the table. "I found this while cleaning my mother's attic." Naomi opened it carefully. Inside lay dozens of old photographs. Some showed Eleanor Whitmore as a young woman volunteering at neighborhood food drives. Others captured Ethan as a little boy planting trees beside his parents. Tucked beneath the photographs rested a handwritten letter. "My mother wrote it before she passed away," Ethan said quietly. Naomi unfolded the page. Near the bottom, one sentence caught her attention. "Character is revealed by the people we protect when protecting them costs us something." She looked up slowly. Ethan nodded. "I failed that test." His voice remained steady. "I can't change that night." "No. I can't ask you to erase it." "You shouldn't." He took a long breath before continuing. "I spent my entire life believing success meant building something no one could take away." His eyes drifted toward the children outside. "I finally understand that I already had that." He smiled sadly. "And I let it walk out the front door." Naomi studied the man sitting across from her. The arrogance that once surrounded him had vanished. So had the certainty. In its place stood humility. Not performed. Earned. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said softly. "I know. But forgiveness isn't the same as returning." He lowered his head. "I understand." For the first time since they met, Ethan didn't argue, didn't negotiate, didn't try to persuade. He simply accepted her truth. After a quiet moment, Naomi reached into her desk drawer. She removed the gold wedding ring he had left in her care after their last meeting. She placed it gently into his hand. "It belongs to your past," she said. "So do I." She smiled with kindness rather than sadness. "No, you'll always be part of my story." She glanced toward the busy offices where dozens of young attorneys continued helping families they had never met. "But not my future." Ethan closed his fingers around the ring. Oddly, It no longer felt like losing. It felt like finally understanding the cost of what he had once taken for granted. As he walked toward the door, Naomi spoke one final time. "Ethan." He turned. "The next time someone stands alone." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. He nodded. "I won't be silent." Outside, snow continued falling over the city, covering streets, rooftops, and yesterday's footprints with a clean white beginning. Ethan walked away carrying only a wooden box, a wedding ring, and the lesson that would shape the rest of his life. Some love stories end with two people finding their way back to each other. The most meaningful ones end with two people finding their way back to themselves. Because in the end, the greatest act of love is not holding on to someone who has outgrown your silence. It is becoming the kind of person whose courage ensures no one else will ever have to walk away alone.